Joining me right now is Democratic Congressman David Cicilline of Rhode Island, who sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and MSNBC political analyst David Corn, Washington Bureau Chief of Mother Jones. Congressman, thank you for joining us. Do you have information on this beyond us that you can't tell us about? Because I'm curious. I want to learn more.
No, I don't, although I think if you look at all of the evidence that we do have, there are a series of events that are pretty suspicious. Here is Carter Page. He goes to Moscow. He comes back, goes to the Republican National Convention. The only thing they changed in the party platform is a pro-Russia policy as it relates to Ukraine. Shortly after he returns back to the United States, the WikiLeaks begins the release of the emails from stolen from the DNC. And then you have Carter Page, who's changed his story. First he said, no, I'd never met Ambassador Cicilline at the convention. Then he acknowledged to your own Chris Hayes he did. Then he said, we never talked about sanctions. And then he admitted in a subsequent interview, well, maybe we did talk about sanctions. So you have a changing story, some very suspicious behavior. This is the foreign policy advisor to the presidential candidate. And it's a reason we need to get to the bottom of this.
You're right, Congressman. That's what Trump calls him back when he admitted he existed. Anyway, the Times reports that it is unclear exactly what about Mr. Page's visit drew the FBI's interest. Meetings he had during his 3 days in Moscow, intercepted communications of Russian officials speaking about him, or something else. When asked about his trip to Moscow last week, Page couldn't seem to get his story straight. First, he told CNN he didn't discuss the lifting of U.S. sanctions on Russia with anyone in Moscow. Let's watch.
Did you ever talk with anyone there about maybe President Trump, if he were elected, then candidate Trump, would be willing to get rid of the sanctions?
Never any direct conversation such as that. I mean, look, it's...
What do you mean direct conversation? I don't know what that means, direct conversation.
Well, I'm just saying, no, that was never said, no.
But then in a subsequent interview, he didn't appear so sure.
It sounds like from what you're saying, it's possible that you may have discussed the easing of sanctions.
Something may have come up in a conversation. I have no recollection, and there is nothing specifically that I would have done that would have given people that impression, George.
But you can't say without equivocation that you didn't discuss the easing of sanctions.
Someone may have brought it up. I have no recollection, and if it was not something I was offering or someone was asking for.
You know, I don't know whether he talks like he's been lawyered up or not, or he's just a little ditzy, but the guy seems to want attention. The way he answers questions on television is a guy that wants to be intriguing.
Well,
what's he up to?
He comes across as squirrely, and his answers are kind of evasive, nothing but like that, such as whatever.
What's an indirect conversation?
And whether he's doing that purposefully, whether that's just the way he talks and speaks, it's hard to know.
He's like a fan dancer in a burlesque show.
To me,
he wants you to focus on him, but he wants to tease you away from it the whole time. It's weird.
And if he was working for the Trump campaign or the Russians or cooperating with the FBI, none of them would want him to do this. You know, the most intriguing thing you just read in that little excerpt from the New York Times was when it said, and other Trump associates. Yeah. So we're focusing on Carter Page. His name seems to be front and center here.
You think he's a decoy duck?
I'm not sure he's a decoy duck, but the fact that there are others who they were looking at who might have been more central or more important and maybe are not to the cameras at the moment.
Well, President Trump and others have downplayed Page's role. Of course they have now. However, Trump appeared to know exactly who Carter Page was when he identified him as a member of his foreign policy team in an interview with the Washington Post in March of last year.
We heard you might be announcing your foreign policy advisory team soon.
Do you want I could give you some of the names? Carter Page, PhD.
Well, Congressman even knew his degree. I mean, he throws in the fact he's got a doctorate, and now he doesn't even know this guy.
Chris, it's like that line in the Casino Jack movie where Kevin Spacey says, you're nobody in this town until you haven't met us. I mean, it's like the minute he becomes, it's identified that he may have engaged in some misconduct here or some connection to Russia, they suddenly don't know him, just like Paul Manafort played a small role in the campaign. So that also raises suspicions.
So you get to be a big shot in Washington by being somebody nobody wants to admit they know. Anyway, Congressman, keep up the good work. U.S. Congressman David Cicilline of